Ok, siamo in condivisione quando volete.
One to be online and one by myself. I will be here. So we start with Sharp, Wagner, and McCovey. And the title of the presentation is Stone, Water, People, Network, and the Meaning in the Illinois Rock Art.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kaylee Sharp, and today I will present the paper titled Stone, Water, People, Networks of Meaning in Illinois Rock Art. Isolated bluffs, natural alcoves, springs, and exceptional rock formations are characteristic features of the Southern Illinoisan landscape. Such natural monuments were also the focal points of spiritual power for ancient Native Americans, their beliefs and ideas packed, abraded, and memorialized in stone. In Southern Illinois, the Mississippian period petroglyphs are often found near and in association with earlier art and designs, a phenomenon that suggests that certain places held special meaning over
Matteo, devi
time.
togliere il
These
volume dal
features did not
computer.
exist in isolation, but comprise the core of pre-contact Native American social and ritual networks, as witnessed by the prevalence of rock art sites and others in this region. Modern vandalism and even repeated site visits by caring enthusiasts pose ongoing threats that require our immediate attention. How can such hidden monuments be studied and preserved? How can they be best shared today and in the future? Are there accessible and equitable ways to share such sites without placing visitors or the sites themselves in danger? Such questions guide our present work. We used a combination of geospatial, archaeological, and photogrammetric techniques to preserve the natural and cultural context of Jackson Bottom's landscape, which has been heavily vandalized over time. Using these lines of data, we suggest that the Jackson Bottom's process of ritualization began on the landscape around the Middle Archaic period, about 7,000 years before Common Era, and persisted throughout the Mississippian period at about 1500 of the Common Era. The placement of well-crafted burial offerings and the creation of increasingly complex artwork and imagery attest to this assumption.
Well, there are a variety of images at the site, and they're of different types. And what this speaks to is the fact that the site probably functioned as a sacred location for several thousand years. And so the images you're seeing are an aggregation of images that matter to people at different times in prehistory, rather than all being a planned landscape out there. And so the earliest images you see there are, little pits in the rock face, and these may be archaic, going back several thousand years. You also see what look like middle woodland images, which are human hands are out there. And then finally you see images from the Mississippian period, from around 1000 to 1500 AD. And these would be, there's a very large cross and circle, which is symbolizes the universe, with the cross being the four directions and the circle being the whole cosmos. So you see those sort of images. You also see falcamoid images, which are related again to Mississippian belief system. So you'd see a variety of things changing through time out there.
The centerpiece of the Jackson Bottom's landscape is the geological anomaly known as Fountain Bluff. In this isolated sandstone ridge, several rock art sites are present in the upper reaches and near the floodplain below. This isolated stone ridge reaches skyward, visibly dominating the surrounding floodplain in the bottomlands. In conjunction with several other landforms, such characteristic features dominate the Jackson Bottoms, where several of the largest rock art sites in Illinois are found. Archaeological survey has revealed that the Jackson Bottoms landscape was occupied throughout all phases of the pre-contact period. Sites including camps, villages, mortuary, rock art shelters, and rock art locations characterize those sites. Spatial statistical analysis identified both hot and cold spots on the landscape, which is a phenomenon that occurred perhaps due to changing subsistence patterns over time. Given that lakes in the floodplain formed during the Middle Woodland period, it is possible to suggest that major settlement pattern shifts occurred then, resulting from people moving into the Jackson Bottoms to gain access to new aquatic resources and bottomland for cultivation. The number of sites also decreased over time, but with sites becoming larger and more consolidated. Importantly, based on the site size distribution, it is possible to suggest that Mississippian settlement patterns reflect a consolidation of smaller sites that grew into a few larger settlements over time, rather than indicating a decrease in population. Fountain Bluff is home to two major rock art sites in Southern Illinois, the Whetstone Shelter and the Lower Bluff Base Fountain Bluff Shelter. In 2016, our team began documenting rock art sites photogrammetrically to generate models for analysis. Our initial aim was to explore changes such as reuse or vandalization that had occurred over time using reconstructed models of rock art sites. Such reconstructions were possible as the sites in the Jackson Bottoms had been documented and studied intensively over the past 2 decades by my colleague and co-author, Dr. Mark Wagner. While original rock art site recording was carried out using conventional hand recording methods of photography, image tracing on acetate, or mapping on graph paper, it served as our basis for analysis. And recent recording strategies have incorporated a broader range of new technologies using 3D modeling techniques and even, in some cases, virtual reality. While the Whetstone Shelter awaits photogrammetric modeling because it is an isolated rock shelter located up a 60-meter stretch of a vertical rock face, the Fountain Bluff Shelter in the lower register of the bluff was much more accessible. The site contains over 100 carved and painted images. The natural isolation of the Whetstone Shelter, in combined with numerous rock art images, suggests that it was once used by a select group of visitors to bury their dead or to carry out rituals. The Bluff Base site is located only 3 kilometers south of the Twin Hoffel site. It contains several very large petroglyphs, including a double-headed Mississippian falcon, similar to those seen on the Mississippian-era copper plates associated with the Red Horn narrative. The large size of this image, combined with adjacent cross and circle motifs common in Mississippian art, both located in easily accessible locations, suggests that these may have been public images used for both public as well as personal rituals, but that they may have been orchestrated to legitimize local elites through their association with mythological narratives.
There are a variety of images that occur at the Fountain Bluff site, and a lot of these you see at other sites in Southern Illinois, so we have some idea what their meaning is. You can also interpret them somewhat from Mississippian copper and shell art, but some of the images are much older. It seems like that ritualization of that site started several thousand years ago with very simple images with pits and lines in the rock face. Then you go through the Middle Woodland period and you get human hands from around 2,000 years ago. And then it culminates in the Mississippian period where you get those very large images that appear in the back wall. Plus you get Mississippian symbols like the cross and circle, which represents the cosmos in the 4 directions. And you get 2 images that are really unique at the west end of the shelter, there are two very large double-headed falcons. And the only other place that's probably the only rock art site, at least in Illinois, that image ever occurs. But we do know that image from Mississippian art. There are the woofing plates, W-U-L-F-I-N-G, from Missouri, and they portray double-headed falcons. And so we're seeing that same image being created on the landscape.
Through rock art and settlement pattern analysis, it is possible to demonstrate that ritual activities in the Jackson Bottoms found their greatest expression during the Mississippian period. The types and motifs at rock art sites during this
the cosmos in the four directions, and we're seeing that same image.
Okay, we have some technical problems.
With the video, so we are trying to see if we can go back to the original
expression during the Mississippian period. The types
Okay, we have
and
some technical
motifs at
problems
rock art
with the
sites
video,
during
so
this
we are
era
trying to see if
increased significantly in the Jackson Bottoms,
we can
with three of the
go
most
back to
complex
the
rock art
original
sites in
expression
Illinois found during the Mississippian period. The
Largely
types
absent
from the
technical
art at
problems
rock art
with the
sites
video,
are creatures
so we are
from
trying
the
to see
Mississippian
if
cosmos
significantly
and the
Jackson
underworld
Bottoms
representations,
with
three of the
go
most
back to
possessed
the
rock art
original
sites
suggests
in
that
Illinois
upper
found
world
during the
in this
Mississippian
area
period were made between
largely
Fountain
absent
Bluff
from
from
the
the
art
art
at
at
rock
rock
art
art
sites
carried
are
out there.
creatures from
The large size
cosmos
significantly
and
together
the
with
underworld
adjacent
representation
three of the most
motifs
possessed
and
other
other
avian
sites
imagery in
suggests that
Illinois
upper world
during the
that easily
Mississippian period were made between
largely
Fountain
absent
Bluff
from
from
the
the
art
art
at
at
rock
sites
art
were public
are
out
creatures
there.
from
The large
the
size
and that
significantly
they
together
and
with
the
adjacent
underworld
were concentrated three of the most
Go back
possessed
to the
other
original
avian
sites
imagery in
suggests that
Illinois
upper world
during
that
the
easily
Mississippian
accessible
period were made
communities
between
largely
Fountain Bluff
absent
from the
and
art at
the
sites
sites
were public
that
out
other
there.
meaning
A large
suggests
size
and
varieties
that they
together
and
with
the
adjacent
underworld
concentrated three of the most
representation
possessed
and
other
other
avian
suggests
imagery in
that
Illinois during the Mississippian period were made between
largely
Fountain Bluff from the art at sites were public out there. A large
Kathy, are you there?
I am. I
I'm
could.
sorry, I don't know what's
Oh,
happened
that's
with
okay.
with the last minutes of your video. We were trying to go to the original, but it seems that it's also having problems.
Oh dear.
If you want to say something, you are most welcome.
Oh, okay. Do you want me to share my screen? I think I have the
Well,
video.
you can. We were in minute 10 minutes that we saw. So
Okay.
right.
Let me see if I can get back to
It
the
seems
last
the
point
copy
here.
had some problems.
So my apologies. It seems that this presentation has been cursed from preparing the article. So thank you for bearing with me.
It's because they want us to go and see the real stuff.
They want to visit in person. So thank you so much. My apologies. Let me see if I can share the screen with you.
Mhm.
Okay, and we'll just finish up just a couple more
Yes.
minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
During the Mississippi period, the types and motifs at Rockard sites during this era increased significantly in the Jackson Bottoms, with three of the most complex Rockard sites in Illinois found in this area. Largely absent
No.
features from
Can you, we don't have sound. So maybe you should activate, when you activate the sharing, activate also the sound, please.
Sorry about that. Through Rockard and settlement pattern analysis, it is possible to demonstrate that ritual activities in the Jackson Bottoms found their greatest expression during the Mississippian period. The types and motifs at rock art sites during this era increased significantly in the Jackson Bottoms, with three of the most complex rock art sites in Illinois found in this area. Largely absent from the art at Fountain Bluff are creatures from the Mississippian cosmos and the underworld representations it possesses, which suggests that upper world associations were made between Fountain Bluff and the rituals that were carried out there. The large size of images, together with adjacent cross and circle motifs and other avian imagery, suggests the easily accessible location was the site for both public as well as private rituals, and that these may have been orchestrated to legitimate living or symbolically living local elites from communities like Twin Hoffel. Complex network of meaning are found in a variety of images, pecked, scored, and abraded, and painted, suggesting ongoing ritual meaning of the regional landscape over time. While rock art sites and their significance have transformed dramatically, contemporary vandalism continues to pose an ongoing and repeated threat. Using contemporary 3D modeling combined with spatial analysis techniques, it has been possible to capture and preserve elements of the site despite ongoing transformations due to vandalism and changes over time. For millennia, people in the Jackson Bottoms lived in the dynamic landscapes at the confluence of natural and human-made worlds that have been memorialized through the rock art representations presented here today. At the moment, these have withstood the test of time, using tomorrow's technology to preserve meaning and significance from the past. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Yeah, we made it. It was very nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can you stay maybe another half an hour for the questions? If there are any
Absolutely.
questions? Yes,
Absolutely. I'd be
so
delighted.
we will continue now. There's only two of us after. So, and then fortunately, you know, if anyone that is listening in YouTube or in the internet, in Facebook, are welcome to, in the chat, send us questions. No? So the next speaker will be Maria Pilar Casado. And the title of her paper is Universal Narrative and Regional Categories in the Rock Art of Northern Mexico.
Hi, Miguel. Okay.
Buenos días. Buenas
Okay.
tardes.
I'll say good afternoon, everyone. I share the screen. No la tenía. Miguel, no la tenía la pantalla. Salgo.
Maria Pilar, if you want, we can send you the video. Don't worry. Okay.
Don't worry.
You want us to send
Wait a minute.
Okay. The PowerPoint. Io questo stress non ce la faccio più, nada di questo. Maledetto Zoom. No, Zoom.
Vabbè, cerchiamo.
Yeah.
Guarda, we can see it.
We can see it now. It's a matter of putting in the full vision.
And we don't hear you.
Put your microphone on also, Maria Pilar. On the microphone, so we can listen to you. It's off.
Vabbè, si era chiesto, fatto bene.
Ci siamo quasi. La seconda persona è uno schermo che non vedi che
No, tu sei attiva.
Maria Pilar, il microfono, l'audio.
Sì, io ho provato a chiederle, mandarle il messaggio
Sì,
di
ma lei
aprire il
non-
microfono, però lo deve aprire lei.
On the left corner, there is a symbol that you should press to put on the microphone. It's red.
Bottom left. Yes.
Okay, now we have sound.
Para compartir pantalla, ¿dónde me sale?
Good.
Yeah,
Good, good. Sound and image.
it's okay. Yes,
Yes,
it's okay. It's okay. Ah. Mm. It's okay, the sound and the image? Yes, of course.
Okay.
Okay, okay, thank you. I'm sorry. But good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for these minutes of the coordination, and thank you also for the coordinator to give me the opportunity to talk about for this presentation, and congratulations for the 28th Valcamonica Symposium. Today I'm going to talk about the universal narrative and regional categories in the rock art of Northeast Mexico. It's important, this title, because it's linked the narrative universal, like geometric figures, motif, abstract, and some categories regionals, and the two concepts are interesting for us in the research. The other day I listened to the Professor Anati and said that the communication is very important to the evolution, the human being, and I agree totally, because the figure and their composition constitute for me the graphic medium to transmit obvious or coded messages from the groups. And the groups, especially groups, because in the north of Mexico, the groups are the hunter-gatherer and from the hunter-gatherer to the conqueror time. Through the images, generally the man and the group transmit and communicate as the graphic argument what is essential for them to be known, creating a shared system of beliefs. The execution of the rock graphic can be individual or collective, from the public or the private sphere, but always carry the message for the other, the rest of the group, near or far, even those who are outside for the first circle of communication. In this case, the important tool to do the analysis is the conception of the style. For me, it's a graphic trend that participates in a certain degree of homogeneity for the form and technique linking to space and temporality, chronology and territory, and with another things like the messages or the pattern of the behavior of the petroglyphs and painting. For Northeast, there are a big tradition of trend, the picture and petroglyph with the motif, the geometric and abstract motif. Participates these universal geometric forms, the natural geometric forms, the quadrangular, the triangular, the circles, and the other forms, but conform two different styles, one for the picture and one for the petroglyph. Both are the similar motif, but also there are differences. This is the area in the red line. In the map, you can see many teeny white points. There's the most important rock art site in the country. The line black is the regional archaeological regional. The Aredo America is from the north with the hunter-gatherers. The west is for the agricultural, more agricultural world. In this zone in the center is the connection with the hegemonic and the developed society like the Toltec or Aztec or Mexicas or the Mayan war in the south and southeast. But the area to analyze is this red ellipse, especially for painting, and the square, yellow square is for the nucleation, the most important nucleation for petroglyphs. But this is the area that we commented in the next slide. But the study of the Rockard in Mexico is complex because it's it's composed by a great territorial extension with a geography, diverse geography, with a great temporary, the change of the Pleistocene to Holocene to the conqueror and after, and cultural diversity is complex, and it's important to do the difference in the territories and the chronologies. This is like a summary of the figures for regions. Is this part of the top of the left of the slide is the Baja California Peninsula, realistic, the figure, the human figure, the animal figures. In the west and north, the region is more or less realistic, but began the schematism and introduced some geometric forms. And in the east of the region, northeast, is more geometric, is the area to analyze in this session. Other representation are, for example, these spirals, circles, and something like that is for west with agriculture world. This schematic is centered in connection with another societies, and these other motifs are really the society's development, like this is the Toltec, this is the Mayan, because in these societies also there are a lot of Rockard. For Northeast, we distinguish a big tradition, but two styles, the painting and the petroglyphs, and the characteristics are the homogeneous, the territory, in technique, petroglyphs and painting, but inside in each other is homogeneous, a typological forms and geometric plus another different vocation for the sites. One site is for hunting, another astronomical meaning, another ritual shamanic or emblematic ritual sites, or for mobility or historic. And the polysemic modes of the images as a result of the different vocation of the sites. Begin with just a little abstract. The geometric and abstract painting are in the deposit in the cavity shelter, but no cavity, dark cavity or dark caves, nor it has shelter. Walls in some rock area with a color red, granite, ochre, yellow, white, and black, with some uses to give bichromy or polychromy. And there are a modality chiquihuitius with another register, another categories, but inside of this, after the modality San Vicente Rio Pecos in the border with the United States, in both sides of the borders, there are the same figures. In another time, it doesn't exist in the borders, but in this case, it's in area, transnational area, and the modality, historical modality. The petroglyphs. This is the landscape riparian, the the petroglyphs in this top of the hills, in this stone, that as a result of aeolic erosion, there are a lot of stones here on the slope of the mountain. There are the stone with the petroglyphs, basically petroglyphs. But it's interesting to comment, but in this area, without relation, with a linkage, physical linkage with the petroglyphs, there are some stratigraphy, archaeological stratigraphies for some settlements, and with carbon date about the 7,000 to 5,000, and after the 5,000 to 2,000 years old. But there is a relationship with the petroglyphs. But it's important to know that the region was with population in this moment, in this period of time. Possibly some of the petroglyphs were for these groups. You can see this cornice in the top of the hill, here the stone with the petroglyph. You can see the geometric motifs. Another area is the endorheic basin area in the same region, with a dry climate and an arid environment and inclement habitat. Is a result of the path of the change for the Pleistocene to Holocene. The region was strong desertification and with some oscillation of periods, different periods of the climate or the environment in the large time. This is some of the petroglyphs, all kind of geometric form, the triangles, the zigzags, the parallel lines, or the wavy lines like this or like this. But in the case of petroglyphs, we need to add another motifs, another images. In this case, I put this because it's important to know that there are the representation, the tools. For example, in this case is the points, the arrow, the points, the type Shumla type, a chronology for the 1000 before Christ, 200 after. This kind of engraved the rock is different. It's extractive. It's by scraping, and it's with this chronology is only the relative chronology for all of this painting or petroglyphs. The footprints of the deer here, this part of this is the ritual knives that we'll see in another slide. Other tool is this, in Spanish is propulsor. I think it's like a propeller. Is through the point. And these are the ritual knives. Here's a big panel with these knives. But the top you can see the knives, the real knives in the stratigraphy of the some mortuary or burial caves in the region. This is the real and this is the representation. And also we can obtain some dates. For example, these knives in the stratigraphy are the 1000 years after in the area, and this kind of representation or technique, I think, were more modern than the other. Other sides, as in relationship with the astronomical figures. In this case, is not only the traditional way to represent the sound, but also the orientation of the rock. In the frequency is the sunrise, the orientation is to sunrise. On the right of the slide, you can see the American cross is the traditional way to represent Venus Venus, and the American, from the South America, the United States to the south, to the Northwest America and the South America, you can see this kind of figures and others, just to count something, because there are a lot of panels with these teeny lines or points that William B. Murray said in some papers, said that these lines are the number of the days of the cycle of the moon. Normally the cycle of the moon are 27, 29, but if you count this and this and this and this, you can observe that this is this period of time could be. The other is in related with the shamanic ritual. And shamanic, this is a deer man with the antlers and the footprints of the deer also. And also in the same way is the representation of the peyote in Lophophora williamsi. Is this in a colony? This is isolate, the one unity, and this is the colony of peyote, related with the altered state of consciousness, and I think is in this war or ritual. This is published. We published 3 or 4 years ago one paper with this kind of plants. And at the end is the historical moment. They reintroduce the horse, for example, for the conqueror. In the horse was in the continent, the Pleistocenic moment, but after disappeared, extincted, and reintroduced by the Spaniard conqueror. Painting. This is for engraving, for petroglyph, and for painting. We distinguish these modalities that you can see. This modality could be used with some categories inside and another 2. This is the landscape, and the landscape for painting, for the places for painting. This is a little cavities. Not cavities, are better to say the shelter. This you can see that. But the representation is like that. This is the side that they take the name of the modality, is the horizontal lines with triangles or zigzags, and the others vertical, or the points, or the set of points. After we comment about the chronology. This is like a summary of the most important motifs. This is like a diamonds, lines of diamonds, the triangles. And this, for example, in the middle of the slide, you can see this quadrangular or rectangular with decoration inside that is repeated in another side, but there is a special side that we'll see after for that motif. You can see here. I put this slide because the geometrism is present in this side. This is a Cueva Morita. It's important because the painting is the stroke is rough, the color is some different, is strong. But the important here is that in the base of the shelter, there are archaeological stratigraphy with a chronology, ancient chronology, the 11,000 to 9,000, and after another period to population, the 9,000 and 7,000. It's important because there is a connection with the picture, but we affirm that this shelter, the population was, but the painting, we don't know what is the time, but the population is there. It's important to relate because it's a question of time, a question of patience, because in one moment part of the picture will be covered for the stratigraphy, or for a piece of the wall fell down on the stratigraphy, but it is important to relate the chronology for that. Other modality is the cueva ahumada, with these figures like parallel lines and the, I don't know how we say in English arboriforme, but like branches of tree. And in this inside of this blue line is a representation of a branch of the Taxodium macronatum. Is the, in Spanish is the sabino. It's a tree, special tree, is identified like that. Another modality is this, the Cuatro Ciénagas is different, the color is different, introduce some figures, schematic figures like a ritual or like a shamanic figures. And at the east, before the Gulf of Mexico, we find this continuity, this tradition with horizontal and vertical lines, and this square with internal or inside decoration. But this kind of representation, there is a special place for that. It's like a summary of the possibilities to present a decoration inside this rectangular or square form. This one, and this is like an abstract of this. I don't know in this moment there's a little study about that, but possibly will be patterns, emblems, lineage, textile, or basket work, I don't know, and put this to focus, because it's these figures they have a very precise realization. I think this representation is not too much ancient. Well, this is all geometric style or modality, but we recognize another two. One is this in the border with the United States and Mexico, and this is the Pecos River, and this is shamanic figures with the arms extended to the fingers, the points of some tools around the figures. And with a chronology, the 2000 before present has given for Karen Boyd in 20. This is a summary of the figures. You can see, and I put this because it's really interesting. I think it's a ritual figure. It's inside of the hole in the wall, and around a circle. Inside of the circle, these black figures is in superposition, and the figure is in the center of this hole, and with some tools or some points, or like a propel or something to suit the body of the figures. The resume of the summary, we can observe in this presentation that we are in front of an universal narrative, the circular and the or board in our region of the world, the geometric form also, but with different style, with different intention, and with different meaning. In the petroglyphs are geometric, more another or plus another figure, tools, footprints, hands, human and animal figures, schematic figures, astronomical elements, with three possibilities, the frame, chronological frame, the most more ancient, the 7,000, after the technical extractive, the Candelaria, the 1,000 before, after Christ, and post, and after for the Conqueror time, and the 18th century, 17th or 18th century, because the last Apaches, the last Comanches, the last group disappear in this time, in the really contemporary moment. And the painting, we are distinct the modality we use with another differences with another places. The San Vicente Rio Pecas in the border and the historical. All this to different vocation from the side. It's like a transversal analysis, the vocation for the seats and the sites and the modalities in the technique and the motives in the representation. It's the reason for the images has a polysemic molds. The image. And I think it's all. Thank you so much. I think it's on time, no? So,
we have one more talk, and then we will have space for debate. Ones that are following us in Facebook or in YouTube can post.
I have some problem with the sounds. I put the
yes
to hear better.
Okay, so whenever you want to have questions, send us the questions, and then in the end we will try to both put them to the authors and then also to
I don't
know the ones that present will answer. So the next talk, it's me. I'm the one that is going to give a very small talk. And you know, the subject of this, the theme of this session was discoveries, news from the world. This paper, maybe it's not exactly a discover, but is something that I thought it would be interesting to share with all of you. Since the one interest that I have, and many of you probably share it with me, is exactly with the history of research. So we don't have a session in history of research, pure session on history of research. So that's why I'm trying to present this small, it's a very small paper, so don't worry, I will not take too long. And personally, it's about something that I found quite interesting, because most of us, we have the notion that in fact the rock art exists since the discovery of the Altamira. And to be honest, more and more research is made around the world, the more we realize that in fact most of the studies, early studies or early descriptions, early knowledge of rock art, it's not from Europe and it's from other parts of the world. And today I'm going to talk about a site that is here in the Congo River. The Congo, as you know, is the second largest river in Africa and is one of the largest rivers in the world. And the basin of the river is very vast. It occupies practically half of the center part of equatorial Africa. Today is divided by a series of countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, and you have the Republic of Congo, you have Gabon, and also Angola. This specific site that I'm going to talk about is in Angola, in northern Angola. As you know, most of this area, unfortunately, is in the last decades after the colonialist periods in a state that sometimes is a war state, so where there is war, and so it's very difficult to go and work in most of these these cutters. And of course, now with COVID, it's even worse, it became almost impossible. But I find interesting that going through the literature, in fact, sometimes we are surprised. As probably most of you know,
Mila, se puoi parlare anche più forte vicino al microfono,
okay.
Ti sentono online.
Okay, so the first Europeans that reached the Congo River, in fact, were the Portuguese navigator when they were trying to find a way to reach India. Now in the 15th century, this was a very important route that was important for the commerce and relations between Asia and Europe. Most of these relations before were made to the Northern Africa, and most of this business was very complicated and full of taxes, so very expensive to reach here, Venice and so on. So in the so-called age of the discoverers, the Portuguese and then later the Spanish and others, but mainly the Portuguese, tried to reach India going through the Atlantic road. And in this search of trying to find a way of passing from the Atlantic to the Indicus, the Portuguese navigator Diogo Cão, that was born in Vila Real, village where I live, arrived to the mouth of the Rio Congo. And the river is so large that he was convinced that he had found a passage from the Atlantic to the Indicus. And so he went back to the king, to Portugal, and he told him, I think I reached the point where we can cross over. And this is 1483, sorry. And he effectively was wrong. What he discovered, what he found was the river, the mouth of the river. The King John II, sent him back to check it well and said, are you really sure that this is the way? You should continue. And so in the second voyage in 1485, he finally understood that it was a river, not the passage to the other side. It was a Portuguese navigator, Bartolomeu Dias, that found it some years later. So there was a way of passing the Cape of what is called today the Cape of Good Hope. But so it's interesting that in the second voyage, Diogo Cão made a kind of historical Rockard, because instead of the usual, the Portuguese used usually to mark the territories where they arrived with a stone pillar with the cross of Christ. In this case, he made some engravings, and you can see it's still the cross. You can see the symbols of Portugal, but it's engraved, and it's engraved where? It's engraved exactly in the Alala Falls. That is 140 kilometers from the mouth, and it's the last place where the boats can go, the ship can go, because there's a waterfall, and then it is impossible. So most of the river of Congo, the Portuguese call Zaire, and you will see that this is a name that is often confused. The Congo and Zaire, both are used sometimes to refer to the same thing. The Portuguese word Zaire was the closest to the local language. And so in the 15th, 16th, 17th century, usually the river was referred as Zaire, and then later it becomes Congo. So that's the terminology changed a bit. But when he arrived there, he understood that he couldn't continue. So there was no way. And since 1485 till somebody that all of you know, the Livingstone, much later in the 19th century, this was the way, the knowledge that you have of this vast, very wide, very wide area of the world. So this, for example, is one of the beautiful etchings published by Livingstone of exactly this waterfall. So you can see why it was impossible to continue, because there was this lump of land in the middle of the river. In reality, between your accounts in 1485 and Livingston in the late 90s, the river was the subject of one of the most extraordinary expeditions that I have heard. It's almost unknown, very little, not so many people know about this. It was a proper scientific expedition that the English prepared, the British prepared for the river. And as you can see, it's the narrative, the river Zaire, usually called the Congo. So you have these two words that I was telling before. And so in 1816, the British were sufficiently calm because, they didn't have the problems anymore of Napoleon. And so they decided to start these voyages around the world, looking for places that could be explored. And to be honest, the official interpretation, the official reason why they do this expedition is that they were looking a way of continuous, navigating the river. I think the reality is that they were looking for more markets of slaves. That was the reason, but they didn't put it exactly here. So this expedition was left England in 1816, and they were on board of His Majesty ship Congo, and it was a very particular ship, I must say, because they knew that the river was very tough and that the waves was difficult to navigate. So they took one of the first steam boats that were ever built. But they realized they couldn't use steam in the Congo. So in fact, even if the boat itself, the ship itself was metal, it was a normal boat, it had sails. So that's what happened. They reached the mouth of the river and they abandoned, or they left the big ship, and they continued with small boats to explore the parts of the river. And so what all of this has to do with Rockard? Now, it's quite interesting because we know that the voyage was extremely difficult. This is one of the drawings that they made. The voyage was extremely difficult, but it was a proper, what we would call a proper scientific expedition, because on board, in fact, of the ship was a series of scientists that with particular tasks. And so there was somebody that would collect the plants, somebody that would at the animals, somebody will describe and things like that. The head of this expedition was this James Tucker, and unfortunately him and almost all the crowd of people, the crew that was in the boat in the Congo died. As you can see, he was born in 1976 and he died in 1816. So the boat, the ship left England in February, and in October he was dead. Him and most of the more than 50 of the sailors never went back to England. And to be honest, only 30 survived. So almost more than half died. And of these 30, they were in a small boat. And after 1 year of pandemic, what the reality was that when they went in these small boats to the shores, they came back, all of them with yellow fever. And a little group understood that if they would stay in the same ship, they would die. So they moved to the one that was carrying only the maintenance and things like that. And this one survived. And this is the reason why we have the recording, the diaries, whatever they were doing, because they managed to take it to Brazil first and then back to England. So 2 years later, in 1818, the narratives of the expedition to explore the river Zaire, usually called Congo in South Africa, was published. And the book is nothing more than the collection of whatever these guys wrote in this few months trip. And the curiosity, and this is why I'm presenting it here, is in one going around the river Congo. So this is the crew, and you can see who they were, you know. So there was a surveyor, there's you know, usual people that you find in a ship. But then there was Professor Smith, that was a specialist in botany, collector of objects for the natural history, and the comparator anatomist and a volunteer. So this was the crew of this boat. One of the most important was this Lieutenant Aki, because as you can see, among the diary of the Captain Tuki, he describes that on the 25th of July of 1816, they reached the shores of this so-called the Fetish Rock. Today, the people from Angola, the Angolans call it the Portuguese name, the Pedro do Feitiço. And we know that Turkey spent quite a lot of time describing, and I'm not going to read. The book is online, so you can even download it and read it. It's a fantastic adventure, very interesting. But the interesting thing is, and this is why I'm presenting it, so they made sketch of it, and as you can see, there is a sketch of the so-called fetish show, with the name Tagidaya and the local name, so they had contacts with local people that told them the original name. And let's go down a little bit. Okay, so the location is more or less here. This is how is the mouth of the river Congo, so you understand how complex it's full of these islands, and so it's a very interesting place for sure to navigate. And the reason why I'm presenting is that among the drawings made under the captain took by this other guy, you can see there is the ship, and far away the Pedro do Feitiço. No? So this is one of etching of this site, and going through the documents that were left, we could see that they made. Let's see if I go down a little bit. So this is another sketch that they make. So in the plates of drawing that are published in the book, there is a series of very interesting sketch made by the lieutenant, and there they are. So this is one. This is one of them. So with a series of engravings. This is the other one. And Ake even added the description of what they were, so you can read the accounts that there were 33, and what they were. This is this is maybe an hippopotamus, this is a buffalo, and so on. So we have here, in fact, the document of the president of Rockard in a quite early period. So my curiosity was reading this, what happened to this rock, if this rock still exists, and how are the engravings. So part of my work is not finished because I couldn't find it. And that's one of the things that I'm very curious. During the colonial period, Portuguese was, Angola was a Portuguese colony till 1975. This area was an area where there was quite a lot of fight. And so there was a station of the Navy, Portuguese Navy in the river. So I went to check their records if they could have something that could be similar to what was described in the early 19th century. And from the 40s, in fact, earlier than the colonial war, there is this photograph. This is the river, this is not the sea, this is the river. And, you know, according to the records, this is Pedro Feitiço. So this is a photograph of that, supposedly, that site. You can't see it very because it's too far away, but I was pleased to see that at least I could document that there was a relationship with with a name. And I went on to do more research to see if I could find anything else, and it's an interesting one. The next one. So this is a photograph of, as you, there's the date, it was made probably in 1970, between 71 and 72, when the Portuguese Marine Navy was there. And this is what is in the archives attributed as the pedal fetish, so the fetish rock. And the engravings can be seen, and what you see instead is a series of graffiti made by the Portuguese sailors, because this is the name of the several boats that cross that passage. If you look at the pictures, the drawings, and these, they could be similar. They are not so. Maybe it's like that. And as you can notice, they are near the water. So it's very difficult to understand if the water, for example, had damaged this surface or not. So this is the picture that we have. There's nothing really more. Continuing, it's a very dangerous place today because it's a part of, for many, many years, it was in the middle of the war in Angola, so there are not so many people that visit it. But I managed to look in Angola for some documents, and this is the most recent one that I found of what is called the same area. And you see that there's a kind of looks like the drawings made by in the exhibition of the Congo, and this is the more clear one. Okay, no engravings. So it's the picture is of course very bad quality and it's very far away, so we don't have a clue if really these engravings are there or not. And so this is one of these cases that we need to, be very interesting to reach this point, to go there and to recheck it, since we have this evidence that is so ugly. Going through several of the books that publish reference to different archaeological sites in Angola, I found another one I would like to show you, and it's still an etching, still a gravure. And this one, you can see how similar is it to one published in the 1818 better, but there is a kind of a construction of it from the iconograph point of view, because they removed the boat, the British boat, and they substituted for a canoe. But if I go back, go back to the beginning. Okay, so you can see how similar the figure is. So I guess that last one is in fact a copy, nothing more than a copy of this one, where they remove the British ship and they put instead some canoes. So what is the conclusions of all that? This is a good example, I think, how it is interesting sometimes to look in very early, in old books, that you find things that you sometimes don't expect. This is today the earliest published document on Rockard in Angola, but then also in Africa, one of the earliest ones. And it's earlier than the discovery of Altamira, that was in 1879. So there you have Rockard being documented much earlier than what is documented in Europe. It's not the first case. There is a very early document from the 16th century published by the Portuguese from Brazil, and there's other cases. So I think the conclusion is that maybe it would be interesting to look in this kind of books and try to see how is the reality. Unfortunately, in the case of the Pedra do Feitiço, I couldn't do it yet. So I hope that one day I can do it. And that's it. That's the finish. So it's very not. So there it is. Thank you. Okay, so now we go to the debate, and I think there is a demand. Okay, question to Maria Pilar Casar. Manuel has a nice collection of tacos and a kind of studs made of tea barks and decorated with geometric patterns. Can the image you present us of the rectangles and the geometric decoration be interpreted as a tacos? Maria Pilar?
Yes, I'm here.
You heard the question?
I am here. Yes. I think in this question, I saw the question. I think this kind of motif are in relationship with the textile, for me, textile and basket work. I prefer say that because or emblems or like a signal of identity for the groups or lineages or something like that, because the motifs are in another places, in another sites, but here in Mesa de Cartujanos are like a summary of all of this group or textile work, because these motifs are not too much ancient. I think it's not for the hunter-gatherer or for, no, I think it's more the historical, is my interpretation. It's because we don't know the chronology for that, but I think it's more in relationship with the groups before the Spaniard conquerors arrived of this area. It's not too much ancient, and I think it's more in relationship with that, and also with the presence of certain motifs of pottery in the pottery, not too much, but because the pottery is not so usual for these groups. Remember that the groups need to assign to identity, because they are in a wide territory with an ambience difficult to live, and with limited to research, and the population are composed by the 20 person for group, 20 or 30 person for group, and needs identify this group. The relation with the other groups are really far, and need the communication, and this is like a sign for each of the most important group in the area, I think. But we need to study more for that, because it's only the first knowledge. We are two second steps. This step is the knowledge, the first knowledge, but the second step is to give a strong frame, chronological frame for that, because need to know what the motive respond at what time minimum, no? And the other is after the meaning or the related with the way of life of these groups. Because if you have the people from the gatherer, the 10,000 years ago to the 18th century, it's difficult if you don't put in order some of these periods in motifs, or because you can fall down in just a little revolution with the motif, with the time, with the groups. It's difficult, but I think, for my opinion, and it's in relationship with the textile and basket work. No hay nada. Your microphone.
Okay, so I was telling that in 1981, I had the pleasure of being in the Congress, the YSPP Congress in Mexico City. And then I went to visit some Rockard sites in Baja California.
Ah, what is?
And I remember that at the time, talking in Mexico City, people were not so much aware of how rich Mexico was for rock art. It was still, you know, quite a subject that was, you know, not. I spoke with several archaeologists then, and they, you know, they showed no interest. Your presentation was fantastic because show us that how beautiful is and how diverse and how incredible is the rock art of all over the Mexico, not only the Baja, but really all. And, you know, it shows us that there is still quite a lot, you know, to understand and to record and to probably also to discover, no?
No, it's important. Baja California, the San Francisco area is the heritage of the UNESCO,
I'm sure that these are the sites that are also, you know,
but there are a lot of sites that the archaeologists. It's important to say that in Mexico there are an amount of archaeological sites like XXVIII, like Teotihuacan and others, that the archaeologists decide to work in these big sites or big areas, the Mayan world or the Mexican world. But the north is like the little girl without so much study. But the rock art in the last 20 years is important. Is involved in a movement of the increase the study. We began in 1987. I don't remember well, but in this time. With the National Institute for Anthropology give me or ask me for atlas for painting and petroglyphs in the country, and we did a planning, we did a project and began to increase with this project. Began to increase more the study of rock art, but today is important. But another time, I don't know. So, yes, thank you, sir. You know very well that.
You know, in Italy is a bit the same. When we have such a rich country with so many, you know, sometimes, of course, people prefer, you know, researchers prefer to dedicate themselves to other areas and to other periods. Huh? You know, as a Frau, you know, I belong to IFRAU, as IFRAU, the International Federation of Rock Art. We've been willing to make a World Congress of Rock Art in Mexico. Unfortunately, this COVID made it very difficult for all of us. So hopefully, in the next years, the situation will be
in the next year.
Well, unfortunately,
possibly
we couldn't go.
Okay.
The Congress, but hopefully, you know, in the next years we will manage to organize again an international Congress, an IFRAU Congress, and I hope that soon we'll be in Mexico in a way that we can see your wonderful country, and also your wonderful rock art.
Okay, thank you.
Federico Mainland.
Yes, Federico, the person that put us the question, say you were crystal clear, so thank you. I don't know if anybody else is online that has questions. I remember that all this recording, it's available, will be available on the the site, the Facebook site of the Centro Camuno and also on YouTube. So many people probably will have the chance to. We know that there is a different time difference, and so not all of us can be watching now. So hopefully there will be other people in other parts of the world that will watch it later. So thank you to the ones that participate in this session. We are going to move to another one, to a presentation of a film from Brazil. So Maria Pilar, you are welcome to see the rock art of a bit of the rock art of Brazil. We are going to start the film of that we are going to present. It's a world premiere. It was never shown. We had permission to show it here, but we cannot show it in Facebook or in YouTube. So what we're going to do is that we prepare a presentation where some of the image of the film will be there. We'll talk about the projects that we are, doing in Brazil, and you will receive in the email a link to visit to see the entire film. This is for the people that participate in the Congress, that will have the possibility to see the film. The film is 72 minutes, so it's a long documentary. And this will be available for the next days for you to see. The film is about Serra da Capivara, that is a World Heritage Site in Brazil, with 1,400 rock shelters, painted rock shelters. It was it's part of UNESCO since the 90s, so it's quite a long time ago, and is in the state of Piauí in Brazil. What the presentation will deal with a particular project that is being carried in Brazil, that in Capivara, that I think it's and I think it's a good conclusion for the day. You know, all of us as archaeologists, we know that it's very important to discover, to study, to record it, but after, what's happened after? So how can we, what can we do about this fantastic, heritage that we have related with prehistoric men, and especially with the rock art? So what we're going to show you is exactly, part of a project that we are preparing in Brazil. Brazil, unfortunately, for political reasons, it's in a very difficult period. The COVID, so the pandemic, really made this situation even worse. And so all of you probably already heard several times how this has been difficult for everybody, but especially very difficult for the local people, the indigenous people, and also the environment. The attack that is being, almost all of us have heard of what's happening in the Amazons, but in reality, what we are going to present you here, it's an area that is not very known, and this area is, I would say, as important as Amazon, but Amazon depends on the preservation of this area. If this area goes, the Amazon has an open door to be destroyed. So I have with me Maxime Jaffe. He's not an archaeologist, he's an ecologist. And Maxime is going to speak you a little bit with, in the background, parts of the film that you can all then see in peace in your house. So we need to go, yes. We're going to start to show a little bit, and at some you can close this, yes. And at some time, Maxime will introduce a little bit of the project. The film was directed by Dalton Sala. Dalton Sala is an art historian from São Paulo, and as he say, this is a film with almost without words, very few words. Most of the film is image, and he says that it's very important to maybe to see sometimes more than to listen, and so part of the film is exactly that. Can we start, Maxime? Yes. Okay, so.
Good afternoon. I hope, can you see the documentary? I hope so. We're going to skip a little bit of the beginning because it's mostly Portuguese text. Go straight to the title scene. It's basically, as Mila has explained, it's thought of as a documentary to look and think about. So I'll do some comments, mostly about the environment, and I'll leave the rock art up to the specialists, since I'm not a specialist, I'm an ecologist. So Capivara, Selva Capivara is located in this very large vegetation unit called the Caatinga, which is a dry forest. Most of you know about the Amazon and other rainforests, but probably few of you have heard about dry forests, which are actually one of the most important biomes. So I'll let you see a little bit of it now in the beginning. So as you can see, I said it was a dry forest, but this is actually the green season, and it's actually more correctly called seasonal dry forest, because it can rain a lot during the rainy season. Just to give you an idea, it rains as much in a 3-month period as it rains in Cambridge in the United Kingdom. As you can see, this is the Caatinga in the dry season. It looks gray, almost white. Just like the Tupi name, Caatinga, which means white forest. The Caatinga is mostly dry from 6 to 9 months a year, with most of them. Yes, as you can see, a lot of rain can fall in this area during the 3 to 6 month period. It's a very variable period. It depends from year to year. It can range from 600 to 1,200. So I'll skip ahead a bit, if you don't mind. As you can see, it's a very dry and very tangled forest. Surprisingly, some people has classified it as a savanna forest, but that could hardly be the truth. As you can see, it's a very, very dense forest. Currently, it's understood. Between the canyons, you can see there's the evergreen and semi-deciduous forest. So it's a very variable forest. There's areas which are very dry and areas which are green most of the year. This canyon is in the sedimentary basin, it cuts across it, and you will see it will come out to a crystalline area, shield, crystalline canyon. The sedimentary rock is mostly from the Paleozoic, Devonian and Silurian period. As you can see, the contrast from the more green forest between the canyon and the dry forest in front of it. Here you can see very well the ridge between the shield and the sedimentary basin. At some spots, the difference in elevation is about 100 meters. This is one of the rock shelters. It's typical of the area. You can see the gray areas. They are sometimes called armadillo shells because of the tentacles they have. As you can also see, the sites have been prepared for visitation. As as many as 100 sites are prepared for tourists. This Rockard site is found at one of the largest valleys in the national park, which cuts across the plateau, sedimentary plateau. This is one of the most iconic rock bridges in the settlement of Iran, This is one of the best studied sites at the national park and also one of the most visited. You can see the protections around the rock shelter to avoid the water drips draining towards the side. Also in the Katinga you can split into more or less three kinds of landscape in terms of vegetation. You have the low shrubland kind of vegetation you can see around the rock shelter. Then you have the succulent vegetation in the outcrops, very resistant. And you see the semi-deciduous vegetation there, green or semi-green, very close to the canyons and outcrops. See here in the national park, the vegetation which is well preserved is quite large. It's quite a large extent. It's one of the main protected areas in the Katinga. It also protects the vegetation as well as the Rockard sites. See another of the interesting things that there are in the park, which are the capuchin monkeys.
Pelo menos, então. It was discovered.
Notice what she's gonna do next. So
Filmmakers.
these Kapushi monkeys at this particular site have been as many as 52 users recorded, and that was back in 2005. So many more two users have been found since then. And here you can see both females and males do this. One of the interesting things they discovered recently is that the females throw rocks at males to call their attention or to annoy them. So, two users are very important in this environment, a very dry environment. They have to use to find all sorts of resources. The males are the ones with the large crests. This site it was one of the sites that was first observed as kind of two use for Kapushi monkeys. It's still one of the more sites with the most kinds of behavior found. They've been continuously studied for almost close to 50 years. One of the interesting things is that because they actually break stones, at some sites it can be a problem to distinguish between what are lithic, human lithics, and so this is a site that's very interesting. It's rubber tapper site. It's a housing of rubber tappers. So as you can see, even humans have to know a lot of different things to survive in this environment. Rubber tapping was, I'll stop here for a second. Rubber tapping was very important at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century at this site. Although most people know about rubber tapping in the Amazon, this was actually a very important site, and there was even exports to New York of rubber at that site. So I'll skip ahead to show you also a bit of the human landscape. since most of what we see here is completely natural, so to speak, because some parts have been restored, the natural vegetation. We'll skip ahead, and then I'll return to leave some more rock art so you can see. So as you can see here we have the green season. It's nearby to you can see one of the main communities around the national park, the Sítio do Mocó. Mocó is actually the name of that small mammal we saw at the beginning. So
the same thing when dry.
So this is after it rains, of course, it quickly becomes green. One interesting thing at this particular moment is you can actually see the three of the main rock units that exist in this region of the park. You have the sedimentary rock, you have the crystalline rock where the community is, and there's the small hills which are actually limestone sites. And at those sites, we found a lot of megafauna that we found on those sites. So what we've actually seen till now looks mostly pristine, but the Caatinga is actually a very, very impacted ecoregion. Only 1% of it is protected. We've basically been seeing 1% of what is truly protected, and part of it has actually been restored. Here at this community, you can see part of the vegetation around it has actually been restored. Nevertheless, humans have a mixed coexistence with the vegetation, because at the same time they know a lot about it and they use it. They know a lot about the vegetation, but at sometimes you can see these areas where they clear and slash and burn agriculture. So it's a very mixed relationship, but it can be even more sustainable. So here it's from this community. We're going to the main entrance of the park, and as you can see, this area, a lot of it has been restored, and a great part of it has actually been due to the community involvement with the park managing some parts of the park. The community has been heavily involved with managing this national park. Most of the guard posts are kept by women of the communities. But the park, unfortunately, people are not present due to the kind of protected unit. So this is one of the main highways that goes past and through the national park. If you see that little house there, it's actually not so little. It's a honey processing plant. This region is actually one of the most important honey producing areas in Brazil. As much as it's the second best producer of honey in good years, and still the seventh in bad years. So we'll just let you see the main presence, and then let's go back a little bit so you can see some more rock art while I'll talk with you. So while we talk, I'll let you see some more rock art. We've had to do this because it's quite a long method, and we're not allowed to show it all. So this whole environment of the Caatinga has had a very old human presence, and it has continued over time. And as I was saying, people have learned to live with it. Current communities are a mix of what were indigenous communities and their knowledge, and the Portuguese settlers. The Portuguese settlers that came to the area, they were mostly cattle ranchers. And in fact, to these days, most of the people that live in this area, they call themselves sertanejos. Sertanejo means backcountry. And they're very proud of their vaquero costumes, cowboy suits, which are mostly leather, very large leather suits that allow them to go through the Caatinga, which has a lot of thorns. Unfortunately, due to the growing population and needs, of course, of this population, a lot of the ways that maybe were traditional and sustainable, these days have to be adapted. Not all of it is necessarily unsustainable, but some practices are unsustainable, unfortunately. So, as you can see, involving community is important in all aspects, from managing the park and, of course, the surrounding areas. And at a larger scale, we have the Caatinga, which also has many other Rockard sites. And as I was saying, very little of it is protected. Just to give you an idea, the Amazon, up to 9% of the Amazon is protected at national parks and areas which are completely protected. In the Caatinga, only 1% is completely protected. In the Amazon, up to 20% has some degree of protection. And if you include indigenous areas, it can come up as close to 40%. In the Caatinga, the total protection is about 8%. So it's a very small area. To give you an idea, the Caatinga is about 3 times the size of Italy. And the area which is protected is little more than twice the province we are at now, Brescia. So it's a very, very small area. Nevertheless, it's actually quite an interesting opportunity, because unlike other places which have insisted on having protected areas which exclude people, here we can work with people to preserve natural and cultural heritage. So what we're going to talk to you about is Projeto Kipa. So if you don't mind, I'll end the documentation. And we'll go towards a presentation of what the sorts of things we can do. So we'll go to the presentation now. So Projeto Kipa is named after what at first looks like a very tiny and very insignificant cactus when it's not flowering, but when it's flowering, you see this wonderful orange-colored flower, and it actually has a eatable fruit, although many people don't know about that. So our project, we've already had some previous initiatives, and we're mostly about conserving or encouraging appropriate practices in this region, the Serra da Capivara. So the Caatinga, to give you an idea, is in this area here, of Brazil, the northeast Brazil. As I said, it's about 3 times the size of Italy. And we work in the state of Piauí, where the national park is. And the national park is found in this territory named after the national park, but which actually covers a number of other areas. There's a large protected national park called the Serra das Confusões, and also there's a large area of Afro-descendant communities, which is almost as big as the park. So one of the things we've worked with in the past is meliponiculture, which just means native beekeeping. One of the important things, as I told you, there's already a lot of apiculture, regular beekeeping. this is very important because the Caatinga depends a lot on these small native bees. One interesting thing about these bees is, as you see this guy next to the bee houses, they don't sting, so it can be handled by anyone, from adults to kids to old people. Everyone can help. And one of the things we did was organize a workshop with some people and give them a beehive to start with. Another thing we work with is agroecology, which is this idea of using ecological principles to think about how to do agriculture. And what's interesting about it is you can actually mimic natural vegetation, and if you leave a bee, it'll eventually turn into completely natural vegetation. It's actually a very old practice in South America and Central America, both in the Amazon and Yucatan, for example, are very well known for this. But it can be used in any part of the Americas or of the world. For example, one thing that's the start of these agroforests is what are called the Three Sisters, that in the States are very well known: corn, beans, and squash. That's actually the basis of agriculture in Central America, where they actually pick this up and develop it into what's called milpa, where lots of different kinds of plants are joined together, both agricultural and native. And for example, this is a system, although this is, in this case, is the example of the Amazon. This is a 5-year system, but in the Caatinga, you can almost reach this point, but with natural plants. Another interesting thing that's being done in this area is they're cultivating organic cotton. And it's not just organic cotton in a monoculture, it's organic cotton in a polyculture, a bit like Three Sisters. They combine it with sesame, corn, squash, all sorts of other plants. So we've organized workshops to talk about this. And there are people also in the region. For example, this forest here on the side has been made by this chap here, with an agricultural technician. He's one of the first who's really gone deep into this kind of approach. This is an example of what the impact can be. It can be quite dramatic. As you can see, you can go from an area which is mostly degraded. Cactuses are very important to establish these areas, and eventually they can become as dense as normal Caatinga and eventually turn into full Caatinga if left alone. Another thing we do, which might be surprising coming from ecology, is actually working with computers, because computers can be very important tools to help you understand the natural world and also your cultural heritage. So what we do is we work with kids, and first we tell them we teach them how to use computers, but to work with the day-to-day knowledge they have. So first we work with knowledge about their families, and then we expand to the community and eventually to a larger perspective. For example, here we're mapping the community with the kids and seeing what kinds of vegetation, what kinds of land use there is in the area. And with this particular, we not only we did this in the computer labs, but we actually went out and looked at different important parts of the community. For example, these are lots of points of interest that the kids themselves identified, and we went and looked at them. Another thing we did was actually walk around the landscape, and to a lot of the sites they themselves identified. What is interesting is there's a lot of differences between the kids. Some kids, fortunately, have parents that have passed them on a lot of knowledge, while other kids barely know about their environment. One kid, surprisingly, this girl here at the corner in front of the cactus, was very surprised at this cactus that grows out of the rock, and she was, "Oh, what is this?" And everyone, a few of the other kids, "Don't you know what this plant is?" And they were a bit surprised that she didn't know. But even like that, if you look here, I asked the kids about 3 kinds of areas: their back garden, their farms, and the Caatinga itself. And they actually knew a lot of plants. But if you notice, what they knew best were the things that were close to them day to day. So they knew a lot about their backyards. They knew a little bit less about their farms, but they actually knew quite a lot, but not as much as their adults about the Caatinga. So it's very important to keep this knowledge for the next generations and help them, the adults, pass on. Sometimes the adults don't have the time. For example, with these kids, we asked the parents, would you be interested in doing a kind of camp, a bit like what is done in the United States? And they were very interested in this kind of approach, which doesn't exist. So this is also important for the adults, because a lot of the adults don't know how to use computers, and they need them for jobs, and jobs that are important for conservation. Sometimes you need to know how to use computers, for example, at the guard entrances to register information and for the tickets and stuff like that. So it's very important for these women. Another thing we also do is, for example, geographical information systems with technicians. We have technicians and students that are aiming to be agricultural technicians. So you might think, oh, computers, they have nothing to do with the environment, but they're actually very important tool to work with the environment. For example, here we have two maps. One, we were working with the technicians that work with cotton, organic cotton, and locating which municipalities had more farmers. And this other map was a map of made by the students of one of their communities, where they identified where most of the housing was, most of their farms were, and where most of the native vegetation was. Another thing we do is talks. And for example, here we have a talk we did with the students, another one at the community where we did most of the work with the kids, and a large talk at about 200, 300 people at a meeting organized by the Banco do Nordeste bank, a main bank in the region. So to talk about all these different practices that you can have. A lot of them already exist in this territory, but not a lot of people adopt those. Another important thing is supporting the activism that exists in the region. For example, here at the top, you have a panorama of a meeting done with NGOs and government bodies because of a very serious thing that's happening in the region. Mining companies are starting to establish themselves to harvest iron, and this area here has never had the presence of mining, so it's a very serious matter because it creates a new front for mining. Interestingly, this mining front, the reason why it's being created is because of the large disasters that were a couple of years back of the Mariana and Brumadinho dams, that the dams exploded and let all the mineral rejects into the rivers. Mining companies have actually tried to supposedly solve this issue by finding a dry kind of mining. And in this region, they found the kind of mineral they would need, a magnetic iron, which can be extracted without water. But it actually has still a very large impact, both in the soil, in the water, and the air. And one of the major communities, most of the communities that are fighting this are the Quilombolas, the Black descendant communities. There's a territory, you can see a map, of more than 1,000 families, 120 communities. And as you can see, there's some squares, and those are areas where they're starting to mine. And they're mining, they want to mine inside this territory, which legally is not allowed. And nevertheless, they've managed to do this. You can see a poster of one of the women, and of course, they're against the Bolsonaro government, because the Bolsonaro government supports this kind of reckless development. Another thing we're working with is this land plot, a 55-hectare land plot. We've recovered a house at this land plot using a lot of traditional techniques and also more sustainable techniques. So a mix of traditional and new modern techniques, like solar panels, for example. In this case here, we have under these two of our friends and workers. They did traditional mud bricks, but these days you can actually do solar. These are solar drive mud bricks, but these days you can do compressed earth bricks, which are even more resistant and easier to produce. So most of this area is Caatinga, and we intend to keep it as preserved Caatinga, but a small area of it, we're going to do a lot of agroforestry and other sorts of experiments, which can also serve as an example for other peoples and communities. Sometimes these communities, they can't risk doing research and development themselves, because if something goes wrong, they suffer a lot. So you have to have these experimental spots, which new things can be tried out. And this house is called after the meat with these small primates that exist at the house. So to expand all these kind of actions we're doing, till now we've actually worked with very, very modest budgets and mostly with volunteers. To give you an idea, most of these things we've done with a budget of less than 500 euros. And that was 2 campaigns. So now we want to reach about 10 communities with more actions. And our goal is about 10,000. And the idea is to also help build up community centers in different communities. And at this site, we want to do a learning center, both for all sorts of people, professionals, extension technicians, and farmers. Everyone is invited to come to spot. And for this, we have a stretch goal of 20,000. Sorry. Yes, there is. So thank you for listening to us. These are some of the kids of the community we work with. If you want to know more about us, visit our Facebook site. We're actually launching the crowdfunding campaign online very soon. If you want to know more about this, come and talk with us. Help conserve the Caatinga.
So the final word is to say why it's important to save the Caatinga and what the relation is this with Rockard. As you see, Rockard is a painter, it's a part of the Caatinga, and the attack that the Brazilian government made in the last years all over the Brazil, especially in areas like this, it puts in danger not only, the forest, not only the animals, not only local people, but in the end, and of course the Rockard, but in the end all of us, because we, in the end, will be suffering. The entire world will be suffering if we lose the Caatinga. The Caatinga is a kind of cushion around the Amazons, and as you can see, it's a very special kind of forest, very easy to burn and very easy to be destroyed. Until now, it's being protected by these local people for thousands and thousands of years. But they cannot do it anymore alone. So they need all the help that we can give them. The crowdfunding starts with 2 euros, so it's very small. And please, if you have Facebook, go and visit us, and then share it with your friends, because it's helping us more than helping them. And I guess that we can conclude.
That's beautiful. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
But by the way, very good, very nice images. Also the choice of music. Actually, it has been.
No, that you'll have to tell
Dalton.
I will tell Danto. I will tell Danto. And by the way, Valeria told us that already somebody called because wanted to for having the link for
Yes.
seeing the so.
Yes.
There has been some interest in the
Yes.
just curious because it's 30 minutes and I'm asking everyone and I don't remember. So around the year 2000, there was a movie that came out, and it's the images that I've seen reminded me a lot of that movie. That was only nature, no dialogues, no people.
Yeah.
And the images were much like yours. I was wondering if you know the movie, if you got inspired by the movie.
No, we weren't, but BBC made a series of films on Caatinga without saying where it was. And, this is a big discussion if we should say where it is or not. So I guess maybe, if this film was filmed without saying where it is. But at this point, we need to say where it is to protect it. So we cannot continue saying that it's in the Northeast, something like that. Yeah. It is a national park. The Serra da Capivara is a national park, and it's a World Heritage Site. So that's it. But we would like to see this one of that movie.
I don't remember the title, but it's about all over the world, the oceans and forests and stuff.
For the young people that are here, and I'm very pleased that they are here. This is something that as a all the archaeologists, I think it's very important to say, it makes no sense for us to do archaeology if we don't give it back to the community. Now you need to give back. More you give, more they will appreciate our work and they will know how important it is. And 40 years ago, when the research Magnier Guidon started in Serra da Capivara, you know, it was an unknown site. And thanks to the work of the archaeologists, there is 1,400 sites with paintings and engravings. And, you know, this local community, it's part of it. So I think that as archaeology, we need to stop being only in the libraries and in Congress, but really to reach everybody. If we reach the local communities, if we reach the population, they will give us back because they will see that your work is important. So it's a selfish attention in the sense. It's, you know, otherwise they don't understand what we do. They think that we are digging for gold and things like that, stupidities like that. For the young archaeologists that start now, it took me a long time to understand it. I was also like that. I used to do my work, I used to publish, and I wouldn't care about the local communities. Now, I wouldn't care what they would do about whatever research I made. I changed. I think it's, they are our public, they are the ones, the reason why we exist. Otherwise, it makes no sense. It makes no sense to discover, it makes no sense to publish, it makes no sense to dig. No, we need to give back to all of us, to the entire community. And more you give, more really they value our work and they will appreciate us more. And this is, for example, with that, what's happened there. It's true that through the process of doing research, we took, for example, clean water to some of the areas because we were there, they had the cell phones and things like that. So we are part of changing the world. We are not in the past. Archaeologists are not in the past. Archaeologists, in fact, are working for the future.
That is very nice. Also, an architect.
It's like that. But you young people, it's up to you. It's like that. Don't worry. It's not only to be in libraries or now. You need to talk to people, explain to them what are you doing, why are you doing, how interesting it is. Listen to them. Sometimes they know a lot. They can tell you a lot, and they can even solve lots of your problems. We always continuous work with locals.
And one of the interesting things there in Serra Capivara is a lot of the people who work there now in Rockard are locals.
Yes, we have already 4 PhD people that do the PhD that were from the local community. How many PhD people you have from Valcamonica, for example? None. One of the things that we never manage, and I say this because I work here too, it's my fault too. But you see, how many communities are here? None. It's bad. That's really, it shouldn't be like that. You are communion? Okay. So what we need, one, we should have the entire room full with people that are here, listen and trying to understand. Unfortunately, it's a very small percentage, and you need, in Serra da Capivara, we have already more than 30 archaeologists from local people. Yeah, and you see, this is I think a message that we count on you, young people, to take. Yeah, now social archaeologists, and you know, this is what we need to do: reach to the local communities, work with the local communities. And honestly, we've been failing this in Valcamonica. I've been failing this in Portugal. In France, maybe a little bit less. In England, like that. But now we need to do that. We need to make an effort to talk to them, to explain to them, and you know, really to make them. They are the owners. They are the traditional owners. They are the ones that sometimes can protect the sites. So they are absolutely fundamental for us.
All right. Thank you.
No, there's nobody. Everybody says thank you.
Okay, so
bye-bye.
We can close
the session. See you tomorrow, 9 o'clock.
Yes,
bye-bye.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Thanks to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao. Bye.
Thank you.
Huh?